Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Abiola, and in today's tutorial we'll be recreating the lovely top you saw on the thumbnail. You've seen the inspiration, you've seen the outcome. The tutorial for this trouser is already up on the channel as well. I will have a link in the description box as well as in the comment section, so do check it out. And yes, let's begin today's tutorial. The first step we're going to take is to get the quantity of fabric we'll need to cut out the front part. And as you can see, I've gone ahead to fold this into two. I've placed the fabric on fold and I'm going to measure this. What you should have there should be your bust circumference divided by 4 plus ease allowance and plus seam allowance. Okay, ease allowance is needed because this is not a fitted top, so for us to achieve what we want the top to look like, it's important to add ease allowance. So my bust circumference is 38 divided by 4 plus 1 inch ease allowance and plus 1 inch seam allowance is going to give me 11.5 after all the calculations that you can see on the screen. So after placing my fabric on fold, as you can see, what I have there is 11.5, you know, and you're going to need two of that, one for the front and one for the back. Okay, the next step is to mark my shoulder width divided by 2. What I have there is 7.5. So instead of marking that 7.5 inches, I'm going to proceed to mark 8 inches as my shoulder width by adding 0.5 inches to that, so that when I finally fix my sleeve with my 0.5 inch seam allowance, it's going to fall at that 7.5 inches. Okay, the next step is to determine the neck width we'll be working with. I will be working with a neck width of 3 inches. And as usual, because our shoulder is not straight, I'm going to come down from the shoulder width area by 1 inch. And after marking that, I'm going to connect from that point to the neck width area, just like you see me doing. The next step is to calculate your armhole line, which we've done severally on this channel. Just divide your bust circumference by 6 and add 1.5 inches to that. From the calculation, I always get 7.8, but I usually round it up to 8 inches. And because this is a free top, instead of marking that 8 inches, I'm going to add 0.5 inches to that 8 inches, then mark 8.5 inches. I'll roll that into a straight line, and I'm going to measure the same thing I put at my shoulder width, which is 8 inches. I'm going to mark that on this line. All this is just to enable us draw our armhole curve. Okay, so I'm going to rule that into a straight line and proceed to mark where I want my top to stop. I want my top to stop at 17 inches, and you know, we are going to be adding elastic to this top, so the remaining 1 inch I have at that point is going to serve as the elastic allowance, because we're using ½ inch elastic, so you need 1 inch extra allowance at that point to accommodate your elastic channel. So I'm going to proceed to mark that 17 inches and the 18 inches and rule them into a straight line, or rule them until I get a straight line properly. Remember that we'll have 8.5 inches on the armhole line. Divide that by 2, which gives 4.25, which is what I marked. Then I'm going to go in by 0.5 inches. This is just to get our front armhole curve, so I'll go in by 0.5 inches and I'll mark that. On this armhole line, I'm going to divide my bust circumference by 4, and that's 38 divided by 4, which is 9.5, which is what I marked. Okay, so I'm going to connect the point now. I'll connect using the straightest part of the curved ruler from the beginning to this point, then use the curved part to complete the armhole curve. That's how you get your front armhole curve basically. Now I will proceed to add my 1 inch ease allowance and my 1 inch seam allowance. After adding that, I'm going to measure what I have at that point, which should be giving me 11.5 inches. I'm going to mark the same thing on the waist line. Okay, this is a straight top. We're not contouring anything, we're not snatching anything. Okay, so I'm going to connect that with a straight line basically. Okay, because we'll be using this front pattern to cut out the back pattern, we're going to, you know, put in our back pattern's armhole curve here, which is not complicated. Just connect from that half point to the 9.5 inches you marked earlier. Basically that's it for your, you know, back armhole. I'm just going to go ahead to make this very visible, so that when I want to use it to cut out the back pattern, it will just be easy to follow that armhole. Okay, I would also proceed to input my back neckline. I'm going to be using a neck depth of 1 inch. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead to connect that now to the neck width. Yeah, so what I marked at that point is 1 inch. I'm just going to connect the point. So now I'm going to bring out the fabric we'll be using to cut out the back pattern. Okay, so I'm just going to place it underneath this one. Okay, and I'm going to cut everything out because this is exactly how our back pattern is going to look like. So please look closely. Now Now let's work on the front neckline depth. Okay, so I placed, remember the back neckline was 1 inch, so I placed that 1 inch on that neck depth part. So I'm going to decide how, you know, deep I want this front neckline to be. You can use 11, you can use 12, you can use 13. See, if you want your cleavage to show, you can go down. I'm just going to use 9 inches because I don't want this to be too deep. I want to be able to, you know, wear this to a lot of places, and you know, having your cleavage out like that, there you'll have limited places to wear the tops too. So I'm going to go down by 9 inches. If you notice, the yellow one is deeper than this. I think I used 10 inches on that. So the deeper you go, the more your cleavage will be out. The next step at this point is to go ahead to cut out the front armhole. Okay, yeah, now it's time to cut out facing for both the back and the front armhole, because we'll have to turn them with a facing. So just place the back pattern on a piece of fabric and just trim it out. Okay, after doing that, you can now decide how, you know, wide you want it to be. Just trim it to your preference. Basically, this does not have any, you know, formula. The next step is to cut out the front pattern as well. I mean the facing for the front pattern. I'm going to place the facing on fold. I'm going to cut this on fold. I think it's easier. You know, at times it can be difficult to get the most amazing v-neck when you are done sewing. So what I do before I head to my sewing machine is to mark my 0.5 inch seam allowance on that v-neck area before I go to my sewing machine. Just mark it and connect the v-neck properly before you head over to your sewing machine, so that you know the lines to follow while stitching. Do you get the point ahead? So just, you know, mark that before you head over. It will make a lot of difference. Now I'm going to head over to my sewing machine to stitch the necklines, both the front and the back. I would do the same thing and I'll be back. After stitching, the next step is to notch the necklines. After notching, then you proceed to go and top stitch on your sewing machine. Notching and top stitching, in fact, it makes a whole lot of difference on how your neckline is going to lay nice and flat. To get the perfect v-neck, you also need to notch as well as top stitch. Ensure you notch this part. For this part I notch is like the most important. Then notch other areas, then proceed to go ahead to top stitch. Now I've gone ahead to do all of that, and what I'm going to do at this point now is to iron. And to hold the neckline in place, I'm going to use my hemming gum. You know, I'll place the hemming gum underneath, then iron it properly. Now to finish the end of this thing, you can go ahead to weave it. I mean the end of the facing, you know, it looks rough. You can go ahead to weave it, or you can fold it in, like hem it in. Same thing with this one. I'll put the hemming gum to, you know, finish the edge. You can just go ahead to weave the edge and use your hemming gum to hold it flat, or at the same time you can just hem it and use your hemming gum to hold it, and just do what works for you. So I'm done ironing it now, and here is what I have. I'm going to go ahead now to join the shoulders using 0.5 inch seam allowance. Now the next step is to cut out the star of the show, which is the circular or flare sleeve. And as you can see, I already have two, one for the right hand and one for the left hand side. Here's what it looks like. I have folded this into 4. Can you see that? And I have ironed it so that it has the markings which we will need, you know, the crease which we will need to cut out the sleeve. The first thing you will need to do is to bring your top and measure around your armhole. Okay, I will just quickly go ahead and measure around both the front and back armhole. And what I have at that point is 24 inches. You can go ahead to measure the second side round. Now I'm going to divide that 24 inches by 6.28, and I got 3.8. Okay, so I'm going to add the length of the sleeve to this 3.8, and the length of my sleeve should be about 7.5 inches, and that is 11.3 plus 1 inch allowance, okay, for hemming the base of the sleeve, which is 12.3. As you can see, what I have here is about 13 inches more than the 12.3 that we even need. So just ensure that what you have here is either equal to the 12.3 or more than the 12.3. okay. Now remember this calculation, 24 divided by 6.28, which gave us 3.8. We're going to use that at this point. Note where we are putting it at. This part has no opening, this part has 2 opening, and that's where we're going to be putting that measurement. So I'm going to go ahead now to mark 3.8 inches round. Just keep marking 3.8, mark it round, and once you are done, remember that at the beginning of this calculation I added my sleeve length, which is 7.5 to this 3.8, so I'm going to press plus 7.5 inches at this point, and what I have is 11.3 plus 1 extra inch hemming allowance, which gave me 12.3. so what I'm going to do now at this point is to mark the 12.3 round. Okay, round. After marking it round, I'm going to go ahead to cut that out, and I would also use this one to cut out the second one, the second sleeve basically. Then now we're going to do the major work we ought to do. Now you may be wondering, why didn't you cut out the first arc that we created? If you go ahead to do that, your sleeve will be looking funny, like the down part will be longer than the up. It will just be looking weird. So to prevent that from happening, we'll have to redraw this arc in the nicest way possible. So this part is going to serve as our midpoint now, and we are going to draft the arc round. So I'm going to start from this midpoint now to mark 3.8 round. Okay, so this is going to ensure that the lower part of the sleeve is at equal length with the upper parts, if you understand what I mean. When you make the sleeve, you will understand better. But if you go ahead to just cut it like that, don't worry, the down part will be longer than the upper part of your sleeve, I mean the armhole area, and to be looking funny. So I'm going to proceed now to quickly mark out my 3.8 inches round and cut it out. Now I'm going to proceed to trace out the same thing on the second sleeve very quickly. In order to ensure accuracy, just pin them down and proceed to cut out very quickly. After doing that, proceed to notch the midpoint of the sleeve so that it will help you to attach it to the armhole area. So I'm going to go ahead to notch this now, and I am going to pick out one of the sleeves, and I'm going to bring my top. I'm going to match the notch to the midpoint of the shoulder. As you can see, I'm going to pin that down, and I will just go ahead to fix the sleeve round the same way I'm showing you. I am done fixing my sleeve, guys, and I have a bit of excess on each side, so I'm going to go ahead to quickly cut it off. Remember, you have two sleeves, so this is the same thing for the other side of the sleeve. Okay, and now I'm going to go ahead to join the sides. Remember, we added 1 inch seam allowance. I'm going to join the sides using 1 inch seam allowance that we added. I went ahead to pin that down before heading to my sewing machine to stitch. The next important step is to create the elastic channel for our 1 inch elastic to pass through. So what I'm going to do to create the channel is to open this allowance up, then fold it a little bit first and fold the second time in a way that this 1/2 inch elastic can pass through. So if you don't know how to form a channel for your elastic to pass through, you can browse that on YouTube. There are a lot of videos that would explain that. So I'm going to go ahead to do that very quickly on my sewing machine, and I'll be back. Whilst creating the channel, I left a little hole where my 1/2 inch elastic can pass through, and the length of the elastic is about 23 inches. To know what you would cut out, just subtract about 8 inches from your original waist circumference. Now waist circumference is 31 inches. 31 minus 8 gives 23 inches. So that was what I cut out for the elastic I would be using for my waist. So I would go ahead to utilize my safety pin to pass in my elastic through the small hole I left, and once I'm done, I'm going to join the two ends of the elastic together, and I would just hold the two of them this way. I'll head over to my sewing machine to join them. If you have a zigzag stitch on your sewing machine, use that for this purpose. After which, go ahead to close that part you passed your elastic through. Just close it on your sewing machine with a quick stitch. And yeah, I'm going to go ahead to weave this in the market at this point so that I can properly iron all the facing down with the hemming gum. There are two things you can do for your sleeve. You can either hem it using the 1 inch hemming allowance we added, or just take it to the market, let them weave it for you as well using that outer weaving for the sleeve. So I will also weave the facing like I'm showing you before, and I'll properly come back and iron it so that it will be looking really nice. Okay, so I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye.